Hey everyone! So, in the past couple of days, last week we finished up our Elements of Art worksheet, our virtual kind of field trip. We spent the week on that, and this week we have had some kind of workshop, boot camp, self directed material exploration with watercolor and pen and ink. I know many, if not all of you, have already done some like watercolor techniques with your Art 2 class before you were in Art 3, and the same with pen and ink. So if you haven't gone through these already, I would spend some time with these, use it as kind of a refresher. All of these PowerPoints have examples in them so that you can look at what other artists have made with watercolor. I thought some of these may interest a few of you. The same with our pen and ink slideshow. This slideshow was more of kind of a skimming over some pen and ink history, which I've included a lot of links if you're interested in any of these histories. We didn't do like a deep dive into it, but I would be glad to talk to you about some of these if you're interested. Pen and ink is pretty cool. It has a really rich history. So after you've kind of practiced your techniques, and by practicing, I mean you got some paper out, you got your watercolor and your pen and ink out. Pen and ink can just be an ink pen. We've also got ink wells in the classroom that we used, and like feathered quills and little sticks and things like that, and calligraphy pens. But if you don't have those things at home, that's okay. Just grab a pen and practice your stippling and your cross hatching and hatching. And you can practice kind of doing a layer of watercolor underneath and using your ink on top after it dries. So the past couple of days we haven't really made anything that we've wanted to keep as like a project, but we've just been practicing how to use the materials and what we can do with them. But now we're going to start our first project. This project is based on narrative art. So I'm going to explain a little bit about like what narrative art means and all of the different options and opportunities you may have to start to think about your project. So we use the artistic thinking process in our class. And let me see, I think I don't have that. So if we remember the artistic thinking process, it looks a little bit like this. Here we go. So we're going to be in step 1 in our next class period, which is today, where we are kind of thinking about what we want to make. And so it's really, really important that you look through this PowerPoint, watch this video, maybe come back to it for some ideas as you're going along, because we're going to spend a good couple weeks on this project, so that you guys can start to, build your artistic portfolios. The materials we're going to use for this project are pen and ink or watercolor or both. You have the option. You can choose to do just watercolor, just pen and ink, or you can do watercolor and pen and ink. If you would like to bring in another material, that's okay with me. You just need to largely base your project in one of those two materials. So most of the project needs to be done in one of those materials. I know some of you are interested in working digitally, and we can talk about that, but we do need to kind of finesse our understanding of pen and ink and watercolor, so that's why we're going to do those two primarily. Anyways, okay, so enough of the prefacing this PowerPoint. So narrative art is basically art that illustrates or tells a story. It usually describes self-explanatory events from daily life or those drawn from a text, which could be a well-known folk tale or myth, or another type of text, So basically, you're just like visualizing a story. You're creating an image of like maybe a snapshot of a story or something that's representative of a story. And this story can come from you, like it can be a story about like a memory you have or a story that you've made up. If if you'd like to write, maybe you'd like to illustrate a scene or something from that story, or something that like symbolizes that. You can also kind of go off of a folk tale or myth or other already constructed story if you like. I'm going to go over that in the next couple slides, but yeah, so the opportunities of like inspiration here is very open. There are a lot of things that you can potentially draw from. So the first type of narrative I have is myth. So in this myth specifically, and I cannot pronounce these names for the life of me, so I'm really sorry. But Bacchus, I think, the Roman god of wine, he's with his followers. You can see them all kind of following him here, and it's very dramatic. So he sees Aradne. Okay, that is not right. I'm really sorry for butchering these names. But he sees her and he marries her, and then he transforms her into a constellation of stars, which I thought was a really interesting story. But you can see how all of this is symbolized here. So we have all of his followers, and here he is, and this is the woman he wants to marry. And this is the constellation in the sky that she later gets turned into. And we can assume that this painting is a really good example because it kind of places us in a location and time. It looks very mythical because of like what they're wearing. There's a lot of symbolism we can see here. Like I think that's like a deer head on the ground. We have a snake wrapped around this man, a pot right here on the ground, and this sheet, a dog barking, and these like cheetahs or leopards are just kind of looking around. That one looks kind of sassy. But anyway, so we can see there's a lot of symbolism here. There's a lot of information that has been drawn from this story in order to create this painting. So this is like a very good example of a narrative painting that comes out of some kind of mythology. So this is kind of like a side note. I thought this was really cool. I found it and was like, okay, I'm going to show you guys. But another artist, he saw this, and so he took and made this crazy sketch, and he's like, okay, I'm going to repaint it, and ended up painting this really abstract design. And you can kind of see that he's taken direct inspiration from this painting in order to like make it completely abstract. So here, like, I guess my point of showing you this, besides the fact that it's really cool, is that artists also use historical work as a reference or beginning point for their own ideas. So if you would like to go through and see like what other artists have done in the past, if you're interested in paintings like this, you can like totally reference those in this project. We're going to have a little bit of a research aspect to this. I will record a video on that after this one, and we will talk more about it. But you're going to choose an artist to kind of look into who works in narrative art, and you're just going to kind of use them as inspiration for how to go about your project, because then you'll be able to see what information they drew from, how they did it, like how they took the information and made it a visual thing. And in some cases, you can see like their process, maybe if we have information on that, if all of their stuff isn't lost because their painting is 1,000,000 years old. But anyway, so yeah, this is just interesting to look at. So this very abstract painting came out of this. So the next example we have is Legend. This is a really well-known, famous like amphora vase. It's from, I think all this stuff is over here. Sorry, I'm always having technical difficulties. So it's about Achilles and Ajax, and they are depicted playing a board game during a lull in the Trojan War. And if you don't remember what the Trojan War is, this is when they rolled that giant wooden horse in with all their soldiers hidden inside and tricked the other side and effectively like won the war because of that. So you can kind of see the imagery on this vase. Both of these figures are like really, they're heavily armed. They're holding their spears, kind of ready to go if they need to. And they're playing a game, like a strategic game. And it's a little bit funny because they're both kind of neglecting their duties and they're irresponsibly playing this board game while the Trojans enter the Greek camp. So this image is kind of like depicting the moment at which this big catastrophe happened and the great leaders were like not paying attention. So it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I think, kind of funny. So another legend example. So this artist, Sidney Nolan, created a series of paintings and prints around the stories associated with this Australian outlaw named Ned Kelly. And he's kind of like a folk hero. I didn't know anything about him, but it's probably because this is from Australia. I don't know much about Australian folk heroes. But basically, Ned Kelly was the leader of a gang of bank robbers who, very similar to Robin Hood, would give money to the poor, and his adventures became legendary. So this is like a real person who this artist, Sidney Nolan, has decided to kind of create work about. So Nolan likely did research on Kelly to capture like the feeling of the story, to like maybe get to know who this person was a little more, in order to figure out how to depict him in this picture. And this strange square helmet is a symbol in this because it references the homemade metal body armor that Kelly wore. So that's just an example of using like a symbolic item from a story in order to reference the story in your work. So the next one, this one's kind of fun. We have fairy tales. This is like an installation. So if you don't know what an installation is, it basically means an artist like creates a work, puts it in a gallery, or I mean, it doesn't have to be in a gallery, but in this case it is. And it has sculptural paint, like a multitude of elements. It's not like just a painting or just a sculpture, because you can see here that this artist, Joan Jonas, has put all of these kind of sculptural items in. They're working with light, video, and painting all at the same time, which is pretty cool. If you want to know more about installation art, let me know. We can talk about it. Anyways, back to fairy tales. So they're often based on traditional stories of folklore and will contain elements of truth, usually a moral message. Many fairy tales contain those elements. This is a direct quote from the artist that I pulled for this. She said, "When I started using the stories with the juniper tree, which is a Grimm Brothers story, there was a continuous voice telling the story, and I worked against it. I don't illustrate the stories, but I represent and react to them, find ways to make my own language in relation to the story." So this artist used the Grimm Brothers story as a jumping point. And if you're interested in fairy tales, you may already know about the Grimm Brothers, but there are a lot of like really rich stories to draw from there. So if you are kind of like lost about where to pull information after watching this PowerPoint and seeing all the types of narrative, you might want to actually look at the Grimm Brothers. There's a lot there. And I will try to link you all to some of those stories. But anyway, so the artist in this story, she's taken the idea of the fairy tale, like the basic elements, but she's kind of related it to herself personally. And we can see that in this story, this wealthy couple, they're praying every day to try to like get a child. And one winter under a juniper tree, the wife, she peels an apple, cuts her finger, and drops of blood fall into the snow. So she ends up wishing for a child to be as white as snow and as red as blood. So maybe this artist had a connection with motherhood and wanting a child. So she created this work out of it, which is interesting. So you can also take these stories and kind of relate them to yourselves if you would like. Okay, so the next one, this is really fun. I'm hoping some of you are interested in this. We have comic art. So I have a picture of Garfield here. I keep doing that. So Garfield was based on the cats that Davis, who is the creator of Garfield, grew up around. And he took Garfield's name and personality from his grandfather. So, we all, I don't know, you open the newspaper, you see comics. There's some pretty good comics like on the New York Times. I think a lot of us are pretty accustomed to those. But this will be an option if you would like to create comic art for your project. I think that would be a really cool opportunity. I don't know if we'll have the time to create like a full book, but I mean, go at it. Like if you want to do this, I think it would be a really, really fun way to go about this assignment. And yeah. So the next one we have is Everyday Life. I found this artist, Maggie Ellis, on the internet. I thought her art was really cool. So her work is about her experience in Southern culture. And it flips back and forth between her adolescence. She grew up in Georgia, and she's currently living in New York City. So in her head, she's often like thinking about the differences between living in the South and then living in New York City. And her work is a lot about the differences in those lifestyles and maybe defining moments when she lived in the South or in the city that like made her, connected her to one or the other. So this is art based in personal reflection. Her narrative is her story, like her personal story and her personal connection with these different geographical areas. So here I'm just going to run through some examples. I put a lot of Maggie Ellis's work in here because I thought it would be nice to see for like the purposes of what we're doing in this class. I think you can look at these paintings and there's no explicit information online for me to find. I guess I could email her, but I don't have the story, right? I don't have the written story. I don't know it, but I don't necessarily need that. She gives enough information in her paintings to where I'm curious and I can start to kind of construct a story in my head. So when we're making these narrative paintings or drawings, you can think about that. Like, obviously, if you're doing comic art, you might have a little bit more of a very specific narrative because you might have dialogue, but you don't have to. Like, even with comic art, with some of these, like, there's, it's something we assume. In this one, I get kind of a creepy feeling because of all of these like curvy tree limbs, and I'm assuming this is a barn or like an old shed, and it looks like they're just not supposed to be there. I don't know, you can see the expression on her face and everything's kind of like green and yellow and uneasy, and it's dark outside, and there's this thing right here that says no theft, but that kind of creeps me out. So this could have been like an experience that she had with someone, a defining moment. The narrative could be a personal story that she has. Here's another one by Maggie Ellis. You can see it's her mom, and she's kind of maybe braiding her hair. So this narrative may be like an experience or a memory she has with her mother, how she felt about it, and maybe how this ties her to her Southern upbringing in Georgia. And you can see, I think this is a really cool use of imagery in the background. It's like wallpaper. It's kind of hidden back here. Like we obviously kind of see this first, these two centralized figures, but in the background, we can maybe find more information within this wallpaper. Like maybe this couch was very important to her. Maybe it reminds her of home and being with her mother, and maybe these landscapes also tie her to home. And then here's one more. I think this is this last one I have of hers. It's just called Backseat. You can kind of assume it's like the backseat of her car. Maybe this is a memory that she has that she wants to remember. Maybe it's I don't know. I kind of assume that some of these are like scary, but it might not be. If you have like a memory of a time that really think about a lot, maybe something that really defined you as a person now, like today, maybe it's an experience that you had with another person. You can also use that as personal narrative to create an artwork. So I kind of wanted to give you a couple things to look at that weren't just painting. Some of you may be interested in photography. This is Cindy Sherman. Her work is largely based around like self-image and how she presents herself in these different personas. Cindy Sherman is really famous for dressing herself up and taking photos. Like she is her own hairstylist, she's her own makeup artist, she's like the full production team, and she takes the photos, and she's like the actress in the middle of the scene, right? So she's very much acting, like her art is very much like performance. But you can see, I showed you this photo because this could be like a narrative, because she seems to be this young woman, and she has this apron on, and she's at the sink. So maybe it's assumed that she's kind of in this like housewife role, or she's cleaning the house. But she looks a little bit like, her facial expression also gives us part of the story. Like maybe she's uneasy, or maybe she's thinking about something and she's like shy about it. Like maybe she's thinking of running away. But yeah, so this Sherman has placed all of these objects strategically in this photo so that we can make assumptions about them, right? And make assumptions about this person. So that is a form of narrative, because she's constructing a story around this person. Like she's created a character, and she's thought about all the things that this character would have around them, in this instance, for us to kind of get a glimpse into their life. So yeah, if you're interested in Cindy Sherman, let me know, because I can show you some more of her work. She's very interesting. If you're interested in like performance or photography and self-portraiture and things like that, she might be a good person to look into. I also have these two photographs. We can see, this is a very famous photo. Obviously, I don't know, I'd be surprised if you haven't seen this. I think the story of this, I need to refresh myself, but I think the story of this is that they're coming back from like war, and they don't know each other, but they're just so happy that they're like kissing in the middle of the street. But that's narrative, because there's a lot of like emotion in here. We can assume a story. There are all these men in uniform, and all of these people standing around like looking very excited. Almost looks like there's confetti all over the ground. Yeah, so we can kind of construct our own narrative, like assumptions around that. This one too. So this photo, we see someone running, and it's like, what are they running from? There's something going on here. There's some kind of a story behind this. There are a lot of things we can look at here to kind of like figure out the location and maybe what this figure is trying to accomplish. And then I have some more examples of comics. We have Peanuts, Charlie Brown, another Charlie Brown. And then we have, so I don't know where this is from, but this is by the comic artist John Cassidy. Some of you may know more about comics than I do, but I did a little bit of research to kind of find some artists to show you. But we can see here that this is like, there's a complete narrative, like something is happening, there's a story going on, but we don't have any words, right? So if you're thinking about going the comic route, you don't have to, you don't need words. You don't have to come up with language for this. It can be completely visual. And yeah, if you're interested in telling a story, like even if you're interested in like the fairy tale stuff, you can also do something like this, like show us a few different scenes of something if you're really interested in like character development, or drawing like this if you want to practice. I think it would be a cool opportunity for you. And here's another one by John Cassidy. Obviously, this is from Star Wars. My quality's a little bad. I apologize for that because this looks like, I don't know, I think his use of ink in this is like amazing, and I wish my quality was better, but I couldn't find a better one. But yeah, we can also see here there's a lot of tension. There's obviously some battle going on, decisions being made, and we really don't need any language to figure out what's going on in this scene. Here's another one. If you're interested in watercolor and ink, if you want to do both, this is a great example for that. This artist has likely done a wash in the background and inked over that and maybe gone back in with some watercolor after to kind of detail a lot of this. But this would be a really cool kind of thing to do if you're interested in using both of those. And here's another one by the same person. Okay, so project 1, yay, narrative. So you're going to pick a narrative route. Here's some examples. I have personal narrative, fairy tales, legends. Those are really the main 3 we're going to be picking from. And then you're going to find inspiration from another artist. I'm going to provide you with a list, and I will make another video about that list. And you should be able to kind of pick one of those artists that you're really interested in. Think about their style and why you're interested in it, like the way that they do what they do, the way that their art looks, but also think about where they get their inspiration, where you think they get their inspiration from. Like maybe they're getting their inspiration from other stories or even other artists or their own lives. And maybe that can help you start to think about your process of creation. So as you know, you're going to pick a medium, and then we're going to sketch and plan. So for the rest of class today, we are going to be kind of tapping into that first part of the artistic thinking process, inspiration. So think about, observe things, think about your personal experience. If you need to research and look up stories, do it. Spend quite a bit of time here for this project because, we're going to have a lot of time to spend on this, and I really think that you all are going to be able to do some pretty cool stuff. This will be great for your portfolio, getting into AP if you're interested in that. And then after you kind of spend some time here, you can move into development and start sketching. But honestly, probably start sketching over the weekend. So today is Thursday, and I will have you all again on Monday. So on Monday, we'll be kind of in between development and creation. So your goal before you come back to class on Monday is to have a good idea of what you want to do. If you're a little bit on the fence, that's okay. In class, we will talk about it. I'll come around and see how everyone's doing, and we'll talk about ideas and how best to implement them. But yeah, for that inspiration process, just spend a lot of time with it. It's really important. I know sometimes I don't know, I'm a very impatient person, so it's like, I just want to get going. But I find that when I sit down and kind of do a little bit of research and thinking, and maybe, if you need to journal or write down some lists, if that serves you better for this project, then I would completely recommend that. If you want to bring some things from home, like if you have pictures, you want to compile some pictures on your phone to bring in for inspiration, or you have like objects that you want to bring in to think about or take pictures of them so that you can like reference them, that's awesome, especially if your narrative is going to be personal. But yeah, so for Monday, you should come in with your inspiration figured out, at least most of the way. If you have, like, obviously, if you have questions, come in with them. I'm not like trying to pressure you all to be like totally ready to go. But then we'll start working on our development a little more. We will discuss who needs like what kind of paper, the materials you think you're going to use, Maybe if you need to practice a little bit more with those materials, you can do so and start to sketch. And then after that, next week, the next 2 weeks are just going to be kind of work days on this. And we might talk a little bit more about some other artists. And, I'll probably have some more stuff for us to do on the side. But I hope that you all enjoy this project because I'm very excited to see what you make. And I kind of want to make one too. Okay, so that's all I have for today. Please email me if some of this is not making sense because I really want all of this to make sense for you and to be simple enough to carry out. So yeah, I will see you all later and I hope you have a good day.